We're now going to go into some of these areas of recommendations in a little bit more detail with the help of the panelists, all of whom have been intimately involved with the way that the RARE 2030 project has been set up, all of whom have been involved in the drafting and finalisation of these recommendations. Many of them will be very well known to you. We have Jan Le Cam, who's the Chief Executive Officer from Eurordis, Anna Rath, the Director of Orphanet, Lucia Monaco, Chief Scientific Officer at Fondazione Telethon, Maurizio Scarpa, who's one of the founder coordinators of the ERN program and coordinator of Metab ERN, Fanny Laura Mantaglia, Young Citizens representative, Giovanna Giuffre, Foresight expert at Isinova, who supported the Foresight Study, and Vicky Headley, who worked with me for many years as the rare disease policy manager and still is leading on the rare disease effort at Newcastle University in the UK. So let's start with recommendation number 1, the meat of the matter in many ways, the recommendation that we need long-term integrated European and national plans and strategies. It's been clear for some years now that technology and other things have moved on so fast that the framework that we had in order to work with rare diseases was becoming outdated. It was also becoming the case that national plans were becoming inconsistent and not regularly updated nor implemented. So the new goal, the new vision for all of this is about aligning all of these efforts, embedding them in a sustainable framework with adequate funding in order to move forward with a cohesive and connected plan for everybody. The recommendation involves setting up a long-term integrated plan, both at the European level and supported nationally, because as we've already heard, the national level is where plans have to be implemented on a day-to-day basis. Who better to hear about this from than Jan Le Cam? So Jan, why do we need a new policy framework and why now?
Thank you, Kate. With this multi-stakeholder pan-European Foresight Study, there is really 2 key points. One is that in the last 12-15 years, we had real and important progress for people living with rare diseases. But today, there is still high unmet medical needs, and there is still 20 million people affected in the European Union, 30 million in Europe. The second thing we've learned is that we have a lot of new knowledge, new experience, new good practices to implement now, but also huge potential at hand to improve the situation, in fact, to address these unmet needs of persons living with rare diseases. And we can be ambitious. We can aim for public health objective. Job is not done. We're only halfway. And the preferred scenarios which you just presented of investment for social justice has these 2 axes: the patient needs-led innovation and the solidarity. And that takes us to a strategy based on 2 strong elements: performance and innovation. Performance in the sense that now we can have objectives like reducing the time to diagnostic and increasing the population to be diagnosed. We can set the ambitious objective of saying that 90% of the people affected by rare disease in Europe by 2030 should be diagnosed within 6 months after the first contact with a health professional. We can set the ambitious goal in terms of survival and quality of life for many of the rare diseases. We can set important, ambitious goals to reduce the social and economic burden on the patients and on the families. Let's say by 30% by 2030. That's possible, and that's very much aligned with the objective of the Sustainable Development Goals. But also, I would say, performance of having the EU as a world leader in terms of pharma, of biotech, of digital technology industry. We're not there yet. But second, the innovation. Innovation is all across. It's innovation in diagnostic, the tools, but also the process, the treatments, not only the products, but also the research and development, and how we provide access to patients. It's innovation in healthcare. It's innovation in digital technology, how we leverage it, and also in artificial intelligence. So performance and innovation. This approach is different than 15 or 10 years ago. Why that? Because 10 years ago, what we did was to develop instrument means, creating centers of expertise, registries, research infrastructures. And what we were measuring were process outcomes. This time, for the next 10 years, we can have qualitative and quantitative public health objectives, really talking about impact on society, impact on the life of people, impact on our economies. And to conclude on that, of why we need a new policy framework, is that these recommendations overall are calling for a holistic approach to the person's needs, 360-degree view, but also a holistic approach between research and care as being integrated between medical and social. And for this, it is powered by digital technology, by data. It requires new capabilities in terms of harmonization, in terms of standard, in terms of interoperability, in terms of human resource and equipment, and that takes us to member states. So we can have progress on this scenario only if the member states are fully on board, fully coordinated between themselves and integrated. And for this, we need a new policy framework.
Thank you, Jan. New policies at the European level need to be supported by work nationally. And we're going to turn to Vicky Headley now to think about how this is going to work out at the national level. What about national plans, Vicky?
Thanks, Katie. So national plans for rare diseases, the momentum around these, unfortunately, despite some really great examples, seems to be somewhat declining in most of our countries. So we know the stats. We did our last data collection at the end of last year, and we know that 25 European member states had adopted a plan or strategy at one time or another, in line with what the Council recommendation asked them to do over a decade ago. That's great. But the what happens after, what comes next, is actually a cause for concern. So we came up with a number of quite specific recommendations on this topic. Again, as of the end of last year, we had 3 countries that still had not adopted national plans or strategies, but increasingly more and more countries, those plans where they're time bound are actually expiring. So around 7 were already expired last autumn. Another 10 had 2020 as their end point. So that's a real concern. So we have recommended in the project that we need a renewed momentum here, which should come from the European level first and then be embedded in the countries. We're recommending that all countries should have active, specific national plans with adequate funding to do what's in that plan, and also concrete objectives. We think more often than not, it's quite easy to develop these wonderful documents and they're not pushed forwards. We also think that we need a much stronger emphasis on implementing and evaluating the plans that we've had. And this really should be a multi-sectoral process. So yes, medical, but also research, social, employment, all of these areas. We really feel that patient partnerships are critical in all activities, and you'll see that across the full range of our recommendations, but particularly around evaluating past national plans and strategies, drafting the new ones, and supporting that implementation. That patient partnership has to be there. That's really important. It's not just about patient partnerships in research. Also importantly, we think that countries really need a suitable forum to try to have these debates, and that's something that we're lacking at the moment. Countries need to really be supported to think about what they could and should be putting into their next generation of plans and strategies compared to a decade ago. And we also recommend that looking forwards, we should recognise that very often there's no one size fits all in terms of what an ideal national plan or strategy would look for. So again, this forum really needs to facilitate discussion across countries so that countries can look at other countries of similar size, similar healthcare systems, similar geography, and see actually what they can do more collaboratively. And that ties in with our favoured scenario for the Rare 2030 project. If we don't act here, if we don't push in this direction, then we're going to end up in a scenario where, at best, each country continues to develop national plans or strategies on their own in isolation. And as we've seen in some of the countries, we'll end up in a situation where these policies expire and aren't replaced. So we really will, if we go down that route, we will miss that crucial knowledge of what kind of solutions fit which sorts of challenges. So do have a look at our specific recommendations in this area.
Thank you, Vicky. So we need a European strategy, we need a way to make sure that these European strategies are implemented nationally, and we need ways to monitor and see how this is really changing the lives of people with rare diseases. Very clear. So let's come on to recommendation 2. And we're back to the diagnosis issue. We're back to those little children we heard about, Isabel, Luca, Ursula, and Eric, and how they were diagnosed, what the individual factors were playing into whether or not they could achieve a diagnosis, when they were born, where they were born, and what opportunities were open to them. And of course, across this route, the issue is that there are continuous delays in diagnosis. We talk about a diagnostic odyssey for people with rare diseases, where maybe they see multiple clinicians and many different people in different healthcare settings before a diagnosis can be achieved. There used to be a real excuse for that because people didn't understand rare diseases. There were no specific diagnostic tools and so forth. And so when it was understandable, maybe it was a little bit more excusable, but it's not excusable nowadays. We've got much better tools for diagnosis, not only at the genetic level, but also immunologically based and so forth. And we've got a huge knowledge base to build on. So that's led to this ambitious goal. Let's see if we can really get a diagnosis within 6 months for people with rare diseases. Earlier, faster, and more accurate diagnosis. And to comment on that, we come to Maurizio. How do you think these recommendations will really improve access to diagnosis at the national level? This new baby born in 2030, little Eric, how's he going to work in all of this?
Well, Katie, thank you very much. I mean, this is really a crucial question, and it was very well introduced by Jan, by Vicky, by yourself, in highlighting really that it is intolerable that now in 2021 we are still having delays, we are still having misdiagnosis, we are still having miscommunication of diagnosis. And this is a major problem, and it is really a matter of equity. So this recommendation, and we were very lucky in having this program because we can really make a roadmap and pathway to improve the things, has highlighted that now this can be really changed because we are in a gold age, which is the age of networking. And as a matter of fact, as you said, all the technical problems can be overcome. It's only a matter of creating a good network between the different laboratories that are able to really have the diagnosis in a short time. We are also lucky because, I mean, we are entering in the last year of the European Reference Network, which have been launched already 4 years ago. Now we are in the 5th, and we are facing the next 5-year program, so the year-end 2.0. So we are really in a situation to actually have now a structure, which are the year-end, containing all the best expertise, technical, diagnostic, and clinical, and management multidisciplinary teams, in order to make really the difference. This is not enough, though, because I mean, to have a diagnosis, you really need to recognize the diagnosis. So I think that one of the major duty that we have, and the ERNs have this duty, is actually to increase the knowledge and to generate the knowledge on rare diseases. Still, rare diseases are just in a little corner of education programs in the universities, and they are disseminated throughout the different disciplines. They don't have a real topic for them. So what we have to do is to engage a sort of challenge in order to create a better awareness of what has been done so far, a more efficient one, in order that we create the suspect idea in our colleagues. We don't want general practitioners making diagnosis in their office, but actually to send to the expert centers the suspect about rare diseases. Another thing that is also important is to, and the technology is there, is actually to give the diagnosis as soon as possible, and possibly possible at birth. Now there are in Europe quite a lot of programs. There is a lot of work and movement about newborn screening. Of course, as metabolic ERN, we are particularly interested since 60 years about newborn screening. But I mean, this is not enough. We have technology, we have the possibility of highlighting the disease. What we have to know is what is the forecast of the disease, the prognosis. So we have quite a lot of work on the newborn screening to treat it not as a test, but as a system. And so to really give the good information to the couple to make a right diagnosis, and then to couple the couple with all the possible support, psychological and clinical, that they need. So I think that this recommendation is actually giving this way, and we have all the tools to do. And I think that 2030 is too late. We should aim to do all these things, in the next 5 years, and possibly to give really the difference, to light the difference in shortening and making the diagnosis real, well communicated, and very well accepted by the parents.
That's a very positive statement that these recommendations should actually come into force even quicker than the next 10 years. That's fantastic. And also amazing to think that the ERNs are 5 years old. All that push that we had to establish the ERNs, to get them going, and to feel that they're now a real resource which is at the heart of diagnosis and healthcare for people with rare diseases across Europe. And that brings us neatly to recommendation 3, which is all about access to high quality care, which is another area where the ERNs must be in the lead across Europe, and that their sustainability will be so important. It's still true, despite all of our efforts to put together the ERNs and to ensure that they cover all patients with rare diseases as much as possible, that there is still scattered expertise, there's still care that is missing in different places. There's still a goal that has to be that in this idea of social and health equality, every patient with a rare disease should have the right to healthcare, leaving no one behind. And so this kind of whole concept leads to the recommendation of an ecosystem with access to high quality care, where there's provision of all of these levels of support, not only at European levels, but also at national and regional levels, so that in those beautiful words, every patient with rare disease has a home. And once again, Maurizio, we'd like to hear from you. How do you think these recommendations will help to improve access to care for all people living in a rare disease, with that wonderful vision that we have, that everybody should have somewhere that they can turn to?
Well, Katie, even this is a milestone. I mean, there is no diagnosis without the therapy, and this is what we really want. We have a goal that every disease that we diagnose can have a therapy, whatever it will be, to help the child or the adult with rare diseases to live better. And it is a matter of equality. It is a matter of a civil right. Every citizen with a disease has the right to be treated. So it is indeed extremely important to take the recommendations that we have drafted in order to understand how the major problems that we have and we are countering now can be solved. The major problems are, for example, the availability of the drug, the supplement of the drug, and especially the different time that there is between the market access and the effective access to the drug, which sometimes is also a matter of reimbursement, is a matter of delay due to lack of regulation. So this is not only a medical problem, it is mostly a problem relying on the different system of the national health system that every member state have. Again, I think that the networking and the European reference network can help, because I mean, sometimes the access to therapy is not only because of reimbursement, but because there is not enough studies regarding the safety and the efficacy of these disorders. So there is a lack of HTA documents. There is a lack of efficacy plan that are really stating that a certain therapy is working. And for some reasons, for some of these reasons, some member states can actually decide to delay or to wait for therapy. At this point, what we have to do is to generate the data throughout Europe in a very organized way, in order that they can be used to understand the safety, the efficacy, and the quality of these drugs, and in order to create programs with HTA analysis that can be really supporting the access to therapy. So this is something that it's a major topic. Another major topic is to work with the patients and to have the patients working with the physicians in order to generate and to collect data from the real world data and the real evidence measures that can be used in order to testify and to state that the therapies are actually working. And for this reason, I think that the collaboration between the different patient organizations, the ERNs in trying ways of collecting this data and then to use it to make a request for therapy will be extremely important. And this is indeed, an alternative pathway, an alternative way, that because now we are not doing this, we're just trying to find new therapies, but then it is very difficult to understand whether these therapies are efficient as they are promising.
So there needs to be nowhere to hide. We need to understand how things work and make sure that they're implemented as quickly as possible and as reliably and in such a timely manner as possible. Really important, and a recommendation that I hope will be dear to everybody's heart as moving forward. It leads very much onto the concept also of integrated and patient-centric care, and this is crucial to the life of anybody living with a rare disease. People with rare diseases have vulnerability in many different ways. Vulnerability within the healthcare system, often vulnerability within the social system, and also where social systems aren't set up to support them, maybe also economic vulnerability. And these all has to be taken into account if we're really going to improve the lives of people with rare diseases. One of the major outcomes of the last 10 years, I think, was an increasing emphasis on social care and how important it was for people with rare diseases, so that healthcare should never be taken in isolation as the only issue of relevance. And I think that this recommendation, looking at an integrated and person-centered way of caring for people with rare diseases, will take that in both hands and hopefully give it a really good shake-up, leading to the implementation of EU and national actions, guaranteeing the integration of people living with rare disease in societies and economies. Because after all, that's what social justice and equality is all about. Giovanna Giuffre, who's been a major part of this Insight study, is going to comment on that. And maybe from a slightly different angle, a slight sort of where our wildcard was. How has this Foresight study prepared us for COVID as a wildcard in this process? Giovanna.
Thank you, Katie, for the question. And yes, we will see of how COVID is changing also healthcare and social system. What is a wildcard? In Foresight jargon, wildcards are defined as disruptive events with low probability of happening, but with high impacts expected when they do. So what happens if they actually occur? Take, for example, COVID-19. Events like these provoke drastic change and modify how structural trends develop. In an unexpected way, some go faster, some will slow down, new trends emerge. By offering a detailed analysis of trends relevant for patients with rare disease, the RARE 2030 study provides a framework for understanding and evaluating the challenge and the opportunities that have emerged from COVID-19 crisis. In the light of this, RARE 2030 policy recommendation can be read. In COVID-19, we do see the risk of acceleration of trend of increased inequality and reduced cohesion. But we also witness opportunities arising from trend linked with digital health, artificial intelligence, multi-stakeholder collaboration in research. This aligns with and complements the approach proposed by the European Commission in its 2020 Strategic Foresight report, charting the course toward a more resilient Europe, which aims to offer a comprehensive view of the impact of COVID-19 in order to ensure that short-term initiatives are grounded in a longer-term perspective. And I quote, "Resilience is the ability not only to withstand and cope with the challenge, but also to undergo transition in a sustainable, fair, and democratic manner." RARE 2030 recommendation devise action and strategy that seeks to counter inequalities and promote cohesion in institutional and legal structure in 8 key areas. Recognizing the need of patients with rare disease in different areas and fields is a sign of understanding, anticipating, monitoring, and minimizing the impact of the crisis, especially for those highly vulnerable groups, as called for by the European Commission Expert Group Joint Opinion Improving Pandemic Preparedness and Management report. On the other hand, a key policy lesson that we can take from this crisis is that further collaboration is required in Europe to face health challenges that require a multi-stakeholder, holistic and comprehensive approach. The knowledge that he has, that the rare communities has, can be used as a leading example and support the development of rapid and effective change in health at the European level. And from this change will benefit both rare disease patients and European citizens as a whole. And I'm afraid that all this presentation was also with my dog on the back. I'm sorry. This is let's say the COVID pandemic impact in another field that we're working from home. So I have a dog. I'm sorry.
The dog was your wild card, Giovanna, and you showed remarkable resilience in carrying on. So
yeah, I'm sorry. It's really, I could not stop him in any way. So.
No, I mean, I think the message came over loud and clear. We need resilience. We need resilience of our population. We need resilience of our healthcare services. We need resilience to stand up not only to the day-to-day demands, but also to the demands of that wild card, of that pandemic that you cannot see coming and that you can't control for. And hopefully these recommendations will embed that resilience into the care for rare disease patients over the coming years. Partnership with patients. This is such an important point. We've made huge strides in this area since really patient participation was nothing more than a tick box on a form. We now see that patients are experts in their diseases. We see that it's of benefit to us all to work in partnership with patients, and whether that's in designing care, designing research, and setting up leadership programs for people living with rare diseases, not only in the public sector, in the way our hospitals run, but also in the private sectors when it comes to drug development and the rolling out of new therapies. And this is what we want to see, a vision whereby all patients and their representatives can find their opportunity to provide expertise, whether it be at a local level, at a national level, or on an international stage. And you only have to look at the example of Eurodis bringing together so many different rare disease patient organizations to see just how powerful this can be, not only on a European stage, but also globally. So our recommendation in this area is around the culturing of the meaningful patient partnerships, which really only serve to drive forward the agenda for everybody. And speaking to this, we have Jan, who has led so much in this area. So Jan, how is partnering with patients integrated across these recommendations?
It is, and in fact, the increased rare disease patients, the increasingly empowered patient organizations or patient advocates was identified as one of the 12 trends in our ecosystem during the study. What this recommendation 5 is about is the change from collaboration to partnering. And that's a major change because it's moving from patients being a curiosity or tolerated in a scientific committee, in a governing board, in a project, to becoming an equal partner. And if I refer to what Mauricio Scarpa was just saying, the golden age of networking, mutual respect within network is a key success factor because it's a give and take, it's a co-construction, it's collaboration. And the knowledge and experience of people living with a rare disease is a valuable asset for all the partners in the network or in the activity. So the recommendation on partnering with patients goes across the different recommendations in the RARE 2030, which is research, healthcare, also social services, and all innovative solutions. In other words, what we need for the condition of success is a change of culture, for an active and meaningful participation of patients. It's an engagement of the public and private actors to support financially, but also with responsible policy, the information, the training, the capacity building. 2 quick examples. The measurements, the co-development of patients-reported outcome measures, the PROMs, or the patients-reported experience measures, the PRAMs, which are more in the patient journey or healthcare pathway in the healthcare system or social system. These kind of co-development are essential to be really meaningful, and they can be applied for research or product development. Also, another example is to have the patient representative as equal partner in the governing bodies of the European funds networks, not only for the networks themselves, but for some of the activities, like when working, for instance, on the patient journey and healthcare pathway, working on good diagnostic and medical practices, or working on registries and data collection.
Yeah, no, I mean, partnership with patients has to be the key word, doesn't it? Partnership which is meaningful and which is on an equal basis, not, as we said before, this tick box exercise. And that's the way that everybody will gain more out of this whole process. So let's move now towards the areas of research and development. And in that social justice scenario, the concept that these should be innovative and needs-led, not towards the development, not towards profit only as a driver. So we know that in rare disease research and innovation, there has been a lack of investment. There's been a lack of coordination, and that this has led to the problem that people with rare diseases have benefited less from innovation and the outcomes of research than maybe patients with other disease areas. So the goal and vision here is all about maintaining a priority for rare disease research, whether it be at the basic level, the clinical level, or at the social or translational level. And this is going to call for increased funds, increased incentives for people to become involved in this disease area, and the supportive infrastructures required to expedite discovery and knowledge acquisition. And again, coming back to that social justice, that equality, this should be available. These sorts of outputs should be available for everybody. These need to be innovative and needs-led in terms of their research planning and development. And there needs to be a structure and a strategy upon which this can be based, not a piecemeal way through this area. And who better to comment on this than Lucia Monaco? Lucia, how do we make a true paradigm shift in research for rare diseases so that no one is left behind?
Thank you very much, Katie. Our recommendations address all components of the complex research and development ecosystem. Great advancement in research and a body of knowledge on rare diseases, research infrastructures are already available. But we need to build on them, and in order to make the most out of them, we need to apply three overarching concepts: support, prioritization, and collaboration. First of all, basic clinical and translational research must be maintained as a priority and supported by important investment based on strategic analysis. And this is a fundamental concept. The strategic analysis must be aimed at identifying the unmet needs, at defining the priority areas with particular attention to diseases that are neglected by research and development. And also, it's important avoiding duplication of efforts. To accelerate excellent science in rare disease domain, funders shall support the translation of innovation from bench to the clinic and promote access to existing infrastructures which need to be maintained and developed. And also here, coordination, sharing of information, facilitating access to available resources will be key. Funding bodies will implement existing recommendations and guidelines that are already here that come from international bodies, such as their recommended resources, for instance. A very relevant concept is that clinical care must be linked to research. And here the European research networks play a very important role. Year-ends shall be supported not only by member states, but also by a centralized research support service with earmarked funds for clinical research and natural history research that must be made available to year-ends. Of course, collaboration with industry must be pursued through a collaborative efforts between academia and companies. Also, it will be very important to promote research in public health, social sciences, healthcare organization, health economics, and health policy research in order to make sure that the outputs of research are effectively applied for the benefit of people living with the rare disease. In conclusion and overall, only through a coordinated and balanced efforts for all of these recommendations, it will be possible to reach the desired scenario of investment for social justice.
Thank you, Lucia. So important to have this holistic view of research, seeing it go right across the patient pathway from the clinical side right through to the bench that we often put first. But actually, it's the patient at the centre of all of this, and that's what we need to have in our minds as we think about these recommendations moving forward. So the seventh recommendation is around data. We have data all around us in our world now, and how do we optimize this data for benefit not only of the patient, but also of society? So the issue here is that no matter how much we try to coordinate things and how much effort has gone into this in the past, data remains scattered. There's huge amounts of data out there, but they don't necessarily meet each other and come together to form the kind of logical way forward for answering research questions or answering questions for patients now. There's also data lacking. We sometimes come back to ask the most simple questions. If a clinical trial is being designed, for example, we sometimes find that we don't understand natural history nearly as much as we thought we did. But yet there would have been ways to collect data on those sorts of outputs if we'd only thought of a critical mass, a way to get that critical mass together ahead of time. And this is an ambitious goal. It's such an ambitious goal that all European data sources of relevance should be federated in some way with linkage at the global level where possible. We believe very strongly in the sharing of data safely in an optimized way across infrastructures and countries. And of course, underlying all of that is that data should talk to each other. So therefore should adopt some common ways to be codified so that data can talk, one piece of data can talk to another. So this is all about optimizing data for patients and societal benefit. And Orphanet has been working on this issue for many, many years. So Anna, how do we make the most of data, and how can these recommendations really push that forward?
Oh, thank you, Katie. So yeah, that is a very important point because, data is instrumental for any other action recommended here. And as you very nicely said, there is a lot of data out there. But however, a good quality data and reusable data is rare, as it's like gold. And we need to make it happen that people producing and collecting data become like alchemists. So transforming data in gold according to gold standards. So taking care of the data locally according to international agreed standards. And that is the way we build interoperability. So we need data custodians to take care of data in order to make the most value out of it. And we talk here about social value in the social justice scenario. My data has no value because it is mine. It has value because it is valuable in the marketplace. The value of data lays on the capacity to transform data into knowledge. And that is what we need now to really go to this paradigm shift. So fundamentally, the first thing is to incentivize the value of data by investing in these alchemists, so data stewards and data standards. The paradigm shift is cultural, the culture of quality of data, making data that is of good quality enough to be shared, and the value of sharing that needs data governance, and data governance needs multi-stakeholders dialogue, including patient preferences. If we want culture to change, we need a political will to do so. And the means of the political will that are the incentives. So really money should go to improve quality of data at the source, making that findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, so fair, compliant. And then we need to think in defragmentation. And defragmentation is not centralization, which is not doable, not cost efficient, but as a federation in an ecosystem that goes beyond the boundaries of a country that is really a transnational federated data ecosystem. We don't need to collect everything all the time. We need data to be ready to produce knowledge, to answer the right question at the right moment. And we don't need to demonstrate that because COVID did this for us. And for that, we need the right questions, what means a needs-driven approach of data. In the recommendations, RED 2030 project has already identified a set of questions that data should be ready to respond in the future. So to conclude, I would say that at the time, at different paces, countries and Europe are embarked in digitalization process, including rare disease specificities in data collection is doable, and rare diseases are an exemplar use case in sharing health data across borders. But that needs incentives. So I think that not doing so for rare diseases would be unethical at this time. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, that's a really important point, isn't it? That we are custodians of these data. They don't belong to us. They belong to the patient. They belong to the community. And making sure that our sharing is done in a meaningful way for the right reasons is probably the most we can hope to achieve and the best that we can hope to achieve as time goes on. There's no doubt that data sharing will help us with our next recommendation. And actually, all of these recommendations are interlinked. You don't get new treatments without identifying the patients. You don't get new treatments to the patient without the use of data. You don't get new treatments to patients without the input of patients themselves in the sorts of the study and the design of trials. But we all hope for a day when there will be many, many more specific treatments for patients with rare diseases. So there are still so many significant unmet needs in this area. So few rare diseases actually have specific therapies which have been designed or tested specifically for them, which is why this has to once again have a very, very aspirational goal. 1,000 new therapies, but not only 1,000 new therapies, more affordable therapies. Therapies that can be actually delivered to patients because they're within the ability of healthcare systems to fund them. And these recommendations, therefore, go along a much more of a point of thinking about streamlined regulation, streamlined pricing and reimbursement, a continuum of evidence generation, and a European ecosystem whereby people can safely and attractively invest, and where innovation is beautifully fostered and sustainable. Because we all want what this recommendation is pointing to, which is available, accessible, and affordable treatments to as many people with rare diseases as we can possibly manage. And we're going to come back to Lucia to comment on this. How do you believe, Lucia, that these recommendations could improve the development of and access to treatments?
Thank you, Kathy. I think that here the two keywords that are important to improve the triple A's for treatment, availability, access, and affordability, are European and policies. And here again, multi-stakeholder identification of unmet needs and priorities of investment will be key to guiding incentives in favor of areas with no therapeutic options, while avoiding artificial breakdown of common diseases into rare subsets. It's very important to work at the revision of the regulatory frameworks on orphan medicinal products, but also to maintain and sustain the current positive aspects of these regulations and maintain adaptive pathways, rapid access to mechanisms, while keeping, of course, safeguarding the safety and efficacy of treatments.
Fantastic.
Using and building upon existing resources will accelerate the process. So there are resources out there already, and we have to make the most out of them. For example, the IRDIRC Orphan Drug Development Guidebook, or regarding repurposing the experience built by the STAMP initiative, by the expert group, or by IRDIRC and other initiatives. The access to treatments will be facilitated by stimulating transparency in the decision-making process for orphan drugs through European collaboration among the health technology assessment bodies. And regarding the affordability, the pricing should be negotiated at European level based on companies' transparency on development cost and on a continuous value-based approach. Also, the launch and post-marketing assessment of orphan medicinal product must rely on interoperable and federated data. Very important, as we've just heard from Anna. Gene, cell and tissue therapies will become more and more numerous, and that will require dedicated policies to facilitate cross-country collaborations, to allow reimbursement of patients receiving care in a different country, and also to allow the generation of initial post-marketing authorization evidence, especially for the rarest of diseases. Finally, the development, accessibility, and availability of medical devices for rare diseases should be addressed at European level. And so to conclude, pan-European and where possible global coordination in setting policies will reduce fragmentation and inequalities in availability, access, and affordability of treatment for rare diseases.
Thank you. So again, talking about equality of access, the science drives sometimes the way forward in the terms of developing treatments, but we need the policies to be ahead of the science, alongside the science, in supporting the way that these beautiful scientific developments can actually be translated into something which helps the patient sitting in front of us in clinic. And that's the way that these recommendations look at it. And that's the way that we want to see things go for this beautiful idea of every patient getting access to the treatment to which they are entitled and which they need. Now we come on to, we've finished the romp through the recommendations. You'll have an opportunity to go into them in more detail in breakout sessions later. But we really wanted to highlight in this discussion the voice of the young citizens. And you'll find in the executive summary of the recommendations an open letter from the Rare 2030 young citizens who played a really important role in shaping the recommendations and throwing us old people a curved ball in trying to see, where could we have done things better in the past and where can these wonderful young people take things forward in the future. So Fanny Laura, the question for you is around the future, of course. How will the Rare 2030 recommendations help achieve the expectations of your generation?
Thank you, Katie. The Rare 2030 recommendations go very well in hand with the expectations and needs of the younger generations. The Young Citizens panel would, however, go a step further. We recommend gathering expertise, means, and resources into one single European agency that would manage and be responsible for all the aspects of rare diseases across Europe, the EU Rare Disease Agency. In line with the Rare 2030 recommendations, a first focus area I'd like to raise is to clarify and reframe the role of the ERNs. Although the role of the European reference networks is known, we recommend clarifying how individuals can adequately use these platforms. A more inclusive and collaborative platform based on dialogue helps promote better care for all people living with a rare disease. Along with collaboration on European level, there's a need for more collaboration on the ground level as well. A second focus area, in line with the theme of the Rare Disease Day, would be to reframe what it means to live with a rare disease, considering domains such as holistic care and the different daily patients' needs that are currently not either clearly understood or addressed in policy, such as mental health. Psychosocial support should be provided as a standard for any patient and caregiver, and the toll of an illness recognized as more than just the somatic symptoms. The Rare 2030 recommendations with an inclusive and collaborative approach can be a key factor in actively spreading awareness to debunk stereotypes and stigmas. Last but not least, through incentives or other political means, we need to foster public and private efforts to collaborate on issues through a strategic framework that puts the emphasis on and rewards collaboration. It is important that the different stakeholders unite and see the commonalities in their efforts, even with differences they may have in detail. Just putting it out there, an agency as a more organized and joint front would be perfect for this. Now, I'd like to note, however, that the agency suggested by the panel of young citizens should be a progress where you can add more as it grows and as is needed. What we have in mind is an umbrella of joint action and individuals collaborating, a united willingness instead of something stiff, an institution just for the sake of an institution. The Rare 2030 recommendations speak loudly for the expectations of the young generations, and we urge for implementation. The process of delivering the recommendations by engaging a whole community of experts, patients, scientists, policymakers, and the young willing to contribute is already a tribute that should not be taken lightly. As a final testament, I'd like all of us to remember how not so long ago where we held our meetings such as this online. It is now the norm. The future of rare disease should be about moving the knowledge, not the patient.
Thank you. I mean, I can't thank you enough, you and the Young Citizens panel, for the input that you've had to these recommendations. Your extra vision and your drive and your enthusiasm has fed fantastically into the project, and it's just been wonderful to see it. The challenges that you've put down are really appropriate, and best of all, you lot are going to be the people who enact them. So good luck for the next 10 years as you help with the enactment of these strategies towards a world where collaboration and holistic care is the norm. So thank you so much. So the Rare 2030 recommendations, I hope you've gathered from this overview that they do consider the full ecosystem. They look at rare diseases in the round. They look at the whole pathway. There are different health programs which are already in place, and the rare disease recommendations don't seek to overtake any of those or take any of the thunder from those other programs, but rather complement them and bring a rare disease specificity to what can already be achieved in many other ways. It's important that these recommendations are wholly in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and therefore should be a part of that thinking as well. And once again, coming back to this thought that we aspire to leave no European citizen behind. This is what is at the heart of the social justice message for rare diseases, and at the heart of these recommendations, which we really hope are picked up quickly and moved forward with.